Hey guys, Brian here. I've been making maple syrup with my family for the past several years now, and every year we get more and more questions about the process. You know, how we make maple syrup, why we make maple syrup, what equipment do I need, how to identify maple trees, you name it. So I just thought I'd put together some videos on the process start to finish. So if you're interested in possibly making your own maple syrup or just want to follow along, see how it's done, I encourage you to subscribe down here and follow along with us as we go through this journey. Okay guys, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to identify maple trees. Ideally, you do this before the leaves all fall on the ground, right? You get out there in the fall time when you can see the leaves still up in the trees. You can tell which ones are sugar maples, which ones are red maples, silver maples, and you can mark them. So in the past, I've done that. In the past few years, I've done that. But when I first started out, I decided I wanted to make maple syrup in the middle of winter, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I was doing. I watched a couple YouTube videos on how to identify trees and thought I had it down. And I tapped 3 trees that first year. 2 of them were oaks, and you can't make maple syrup from oaks. I learned that the hard way. So, how to identify maple trees in the wintertime. There's lots of videos online that'll show you the bark, you know, and oh yeah, you know, look at the vertical lines on this bark versus that bark. Yeah, that's tough, especially for somebody who may not be as familiar with the outdoors and telling different trees apart. I found it tough when I first started anyways, and now that I've been doing it longer, I can pick out a maple tree pretty easily in the woods without any leaves on it, but it's hard when you're first starting out. So I think I'd go a step beyond the bark, but I will show you just to kind of outline the differences between the barks. This is a maple tree. So you can see some vertical lines. Just the overall feel of it is the bark's going vertical, right? Another big key on maple trees is the bark tends to kind of peel up the older it gets. So as a tree gets, trying to get the camera here where the shadow's not in the way, as a tree gets older, this bark will kind of peel up at the edges, and that's a pretty good indication. Now we'll contrast that with an oak tree. This is definitely an oak tree. So you can see it's definitely more pronounced bark, kind of further away from the tree. The lines, while they are running vertical, they kind of run into each other and form a little pattern. Okay, so this is a very young maple tree. I mean, for reference, right? It's obviously too small to tap. The bark on it, the younger maple trees, the bark is real smooth. You don't see any of the vertical lines. Let's see if I can show this with, I don't know if it'll come in with the focus, but a lot of times they have little white or kind of bluish white spots on the bark, and that's usually a pretty good giveaway of it being a maple tree. So the easiest way in the wintertime that I've found to identify a maple tree versus an oak or some of the other more common trees that we have here in West Michigan is by the branches. And it can be kind of tough because these trees are pretty tall and the branches are way up there. But something that makes it a little easier are maples are one of the few trees in this area that have opposing branches. So you'll have one main line, and then on either side of that you'll have smaller shoots, and they're opposite each other. They're not staggered. There isn't one here and then one up here. They come out of the same area of that main branch, and that's true throughout the entire tree. So I'll show you an idea of what that looks like, hopefully. So this branch here is a sugar maple. You can see the end of that, you have two opposite branches coming out of the same shoot. That's a dead giveaway that it is probably a sugar maple. So in this area, we're in western Michigan, there are really only three types of trees that have opposing branches like that. Maples, ash, and dogwood. And ash and dogwood, the bark doesn't look very similar at all to the maples, and there's a pretty good chance that if you've got the opposing branches like that, and you see it's a bit of a bigger tree, there's a pretty good chance it's a maple. Now there are three different, well, there's many different kinds, but mainly three different kinds of maples out there, right? There's sugar maples, and those are the good ones. Those are the ones you definitely are hoping for on your property. There's silver maple, and then there's red maple. Ways to identify between them. In the wintertime, it's really tough. I can't do it. But in the fall time, let's say you got this early and you're trying to identify what type of maple tree you have. The sugar maples, their leaves generally turn yellow, and they fall to the ground, and they're on the ground and they're yellow, right? The silver maples, their leaves will turn yellow. They'll look very similar to a sugar maple, but they turn brown before they fall to the ground. So they'll be on the tree, they'll be brown, then they'll fall to the ground. And then the red maples, their leaves obviously turn red. The sugar maple generally has the highest concentration of sugar in the sap. So that means less work on the back end when you have to boil all that sap down to make maple syrup. So sugar maples are ideal. There is sugar in silver maples and red maples. I believe there's more sugar in a red maple than a silver maple. Don't quote me on that. But you might be talking the difference of 4% sugar on a sugar maple versus 2.5% sugar or 2% sugar on a silver maple. So what does that mean in the end? If you have all silver maples, there's a chance you're going to be doing twice as much work boiling that down because there's half as much sugar per gallon, let's say. Okay, just to put some numbers behind it, there's a general rule of thumb that says for every one tap that you put in a tree, for every one tree you tap, you're going to get 10 gallons of sap throughout the entire season. That 10 gallons of sap will boil down to about 1 quart of maple syrup. So do some math in your head, figure out how much maple syrup you want to make, and you should be able to back out how many trees you need to tap to get that number. Now, it doesn't always work out like that. We've had years, we went from 25 to 50 taps one year, and we got the same amount of maple syrup that we got when we had 25 taps, just because it was a bad year. And a lot has to do with the weather, and we'll get into all that in later videos. But general rule of thumb, 1 tap equals 1 quart of finished maple syrup at the end of the 4 or 6 week long season. So another thing you need to know when you're out looking for maple trees is what size tree do I need, or what size tree can I tap? A general rule of thumb is, and this is my rule of thumb, there's guys out there that'll tell you I'm wrong, about a 10-inch diameter or above is good. So maybe 10 inches to 18 inches would be good for 1 tap. If you have like a big farm roadside tree, maybe you can put 2 or 3 taps in them. I don't have any of those. Most of my trees are in the 8 to 14 inch range, and so I put 1 tap in every tree. This one here is a bit on the small side. This one here is, I don't know, 9 or 10 inches this way. It's a little deeper this way. But it's a tree that I tapped, and it's produced well for me. So just generally speaking, if you've got a 6-inch or a 5-inch or a 4, you don't want to tap those. They need that sap, I think, to grow up and be healthy trees. So yeah, try to stick to a little bit of a larger tree when you're picking out which trees you want to tap this year. So a couple different ways that I mark my trees for next year. So let's say it's the fall time. I know this is a tree that I want to tap this year. I'll go ahead and put a ribbon around it. You can see I've done that on several of these trees. These are actually 2 years old, so the ribbons actually do last quite a while. But more and more I've actually gone towards marking with spray paint. So I just put a little white square. This spray paint again is fairly old, but it stays on there for quite a few years. So, and it's not as ugly as a big fluorescent pink ribbon. I don't know if you can see that. There's a little bit of spray paint there. It's a little more natural, right? It blends in. And there's one back there. So I like the spray paint method. I've done away with the pink ribbons. These are just left over from years past, and they will be taken down one of these days. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment. Love to hear from you. Next video, we're going to be talking about different collection methods, buckets, tubing, and a few others that you might be interested in. So I hope to see you then.